Afternoon, everybody.
Wow, they got quiet fast.
What? Yeah.
It's like getting in front of a military crowd.
We practiced that.
Yeah.
So very excited today to be joined by Jake Wood. I think all of us know a tremendous amount about both you and Team Rubicon and what you've done because of our partnership with the organization. We've worked together to respond to Maria, to Florence, the California wildfires. We partnered on a number of things. You obviously and Team Rubicon have done a tremendous amount beyond that. I would tell you, and I speak for everybody here, this is a partnership that we are particularly proud of, doing things that really, I think, reflect who we are and who we want to be and the company we aspire to be. All that said, want to dive into the journey that got you here and how Team Rubicon became Team Rubicon. I think as many of you know, Jake was a scout sniper in the Marines, served in Iraq, in Anbar, in Afghanistan. And just tell us a little bit about, I'd love to start the conversation there, just about the moment you first thought about going into the military and how that came about.
Yeah. That moment takes us back literally 30 years. The story the way I frame it, 30 years ago, I was living in Austria. My dad got a job. He worked in manufacturing and got transferred to a plant in a small town in Austria. And one weekend, my parents took my sisters and I to what had been a Nazi concentration camp called Mauthausen. And a really fascinating experience for a young 7-year-old boy. And so a couple things happened. One, at Mauthausen, for the first time as a young 7-year-old, I really discovered what true evil is. When you think about being a 7-year-old kid, true evil is like Wile E. Coyote cartoons. And, it's like a roadrunner who keeps, fooling this fox into jumping off a cliff. You go to Mauthausen and you're standing in front of an oven that used to burn kids' bodies, and you're like, no, this is what human beings are capable of. So that was the first thing. The second thing was the last exhibit that we saw at Mauthausen was the exhibit that showed the liberation of the camp, by Patton's army coming through. And I sat there, reflecting on the idea that hundreds of thousands of men and women had come across an ocean to a country that they'd never been to help people that they'd never met. And they call that one the Great War for a reason. It was great evil, and a bunch of great men and women stood up to it. But I thought, in that moment, I want to live a life of consequence like that. I don't think that's how I framed it when I was 7 years old, but that's kind of what I thought. And so when I came home, I really thought that I would join the military. I was going through high school. I was speaking to military recruiters. I began applications to West Point and the Naval Academy in Annapolis, and was contacted. You have to get like senators to endorse you and stuff like that. So I was going through all of that, and ended up getting a football scholarship to go play at the University of Wisconsin, which was an opportunity that at the time I didn't want to pass up. So I took it. Turns out I was a really shitty football player.
But a good sniper.
Yeah, but when you don't make it to the NFL, you end in the Marine Corps. You weren't that good. Yeah. But the way I got to the Marine Corps from there, my freshman year was 9/11, and the world changed for all of us. I come to New York and New Jersey often, and sometimes I do events like this, and when I talk about 9/11 impacting me in front of people like you who were here, I can't even imagine. But we all know where we were. We all know what we thought and what we felt. And in that moment, I thought, this is what I aspired to do for my whole life, was to serve in a moment like this, and here I am playing football. And I made a bunch of excuses, and I went to practice that afternoon, and I went to the game that weekend. I remember it was against Penn State in Happy Valley, and for 4 years made excuses. And then finally, right before my senior year, Pat Tillman was killed in Afghanistan. Pat Tillman had been a football player, joined the Army, and that was, for me, that was the moment where I said, all right, here's a person who had the courage to give away a lot more than I'm giving away, and paid that sacrifice, and I can no longer, look at myself in the mirror and think that I'm the man I thought that 7-year-old would grow up to become.
Yeah.
But so I joined the Marines.
And you did it.
Yeah,
And
didn't. Yeah.
and so you showed up in the Marines, and you were deployed then to Iraq. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that moment of at once, beginning to find this sense of purpose of I'm doing what I was meant to do in life, but also showing up in Iraq and in a place where lots of things were going wrong,
Yeah.
lots of things you couldn't control, and what you learned, and how it was different from what you were expecting.
Yeah, I didn't go to war thinking that's what I was put on this earth for. Iraq was tough. We went there during the surge. It was 2007, and we were in the Anbar province. We were in a part of the Anbar province known as the Triangle of Death. So this is the deadliest year of the war, the deadliest corner of the deadliest province. It was a really bad time to be in Iraq. And Iraq was challenging because the mission was ambiguous at best. I think for those of us who thought that it was the right conflict for us to be in, I don't think many of us left with that sense. And so that was problematic. I mean, it's really easy to, when you have a mission that everybody's steadfastly believing in, to go out and put your lives on the line for it every day. It's really hard when that mission becomes less clear, when it becomes less noble, I'm proud of the service that I did in Iraq. My country asked me to go, and I went. And I would go again if my country asked me to go.
Yeah.
And we did do good work where we were. We did help people who needed help. We made a region that was the most violent region of Iraq. We made it peaceful by the time we left. The joke you always hear from Marines is, hey, we were winning when I left. It wasn't my fault. Somebody else screwed up. But in 2007, over the course of 7 months, almost completely pacified this region.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that went into that. But, it was just it was just so interesting, because what you end up doing, war in combat is full of all these cliches that we hear in movies, but so many of them ring true. When we started to lose, some semblance of faith in that mission, what did we turn to? Well, we turned to each other. Mm-hmm. And you find this purpose of how do we come home together? How do we accomplish the objectives that we do have in front of us, but how do we get home together? How can I go out every single day, know that I can count on you and that you can count on me? That is as fulfilling a human experience as anybody can ever encounter. Right? That's fundamental to every human being on this planet, whether you're in the military or whether you're not, is being a part of a tribe, having people on your left and your right, whether they're your family, your work colleagues, your teammates, whatever it might be, that you can count on in the highest circumstance. And you get that in the military. And it's a drug, that type of brotherhood and sisterhood.
But you've been able to take that ethos and use that idea as, in many ways, the founding ethos of Team Rubicon. Yeah. So tell us about Haiti and how Team Rubicon came to be, because it was, I sense, a personal just experiment of yours long before it was Team Rubicon.
Yeah, we definitely didn't go to Haiti thinking we were going to build a $50 million nonprofit. I got out of the Marine Corps, and 2 months later, I'm sitting around on my girlfriend's couch in Los Angeles, eating potato chips in my underwear. Is how the joke goes. Leaning back like this, eating them out of my belly button or something. And I see the news about this Haiti earthquake, and I sit there and I'm watching it for hours, literally hours. My coffee goes cold. I'm just sitting there, and about halfway through the day, my wife, or girlfriend at the time, gets home, and I look at her and I'm like, I think I should go to Haiti. I have tons of bad ideas, right? And my wife is really good about telling me about all of them. And she looked at me and she said, I think that's a good idea, but just do me a favor. Find some guys that you and I both trust to go with you. And she knew a bunch of the guys I'd served with. And so I started calling people, and I got 3 people to go with me, so there was 4 of us. And we got down to Port-au-Prince about 4 days after the earthquake, and it was the most insane situation I've ever seen, and I think I ever will see. I mean, the destruction, the chaos was unfathomable. and we just got to work. And I mean, there's the stories that I could tell about those first 2 or 3 days. Even just crossing the border from the Dominican into Haiti.
You just snuck in.
I mean, we didn't sneak in. I mean, it's not like we put night vision goggles on and crawled across the border.
But no one had invited you. You just went. You had the audacity to just do it when there was no organization.
The Port-au-Prince airport was shut down. We flew into Santo Domingo in the Dominican.
What did you bring with you?
We brought just bags and like those giant North Face bags of supplies, medical supplies. We brought gear like equipment, tents, all that stuff to sustain ourselves, water filtration equipment. And we kind of thought, okay, we'll get down there. We'll expend all of these non-durable supplies, like all the gauze, all the stuff that we could use to treat and bandage wounds. And then we have no resupply, so we'll be down there for 4 days and we'll come back. Well, 20 days later, and about 60 people rotating through, we'd done a lot more than what we had originally planned. I mean, we were a week into this thing, and we were updating what we were doing on this blog, and it just kind of became like, I wouldn't say viral, but like mini viral online. The story of like these renegade military veterans running around Port-au-Prince doing good, and. In the middle of the night, we were staying in this compound. It was like you guys know what the Jesuits are in the Catholic Church? So the Jesuits are like, they call them the special forces of the Catholic Church. They're like these, they're brothers, but they're not priests. And they go into the worst countries, the most underdeveloped countries, and they teach is primarily what they do. So we're staying at this Jesuit compound. We had this quid pro quo agreement with them that we would provide security for them and they would provide this shelter. Big compound walls, and it had a freshwater well, which was key. Middle of the night, people would knock on the door. They'd be like, hey, we're looking for Team Rubicon. I'd be like, who the hell are you? And one night, I'm not even kidding, a week into this thing, somebody knocks on the compound wall. And you understand, of course, that this compound was surrounded day and night by hundreds of Haitians looking to get in. When we would leave the compound in our trucks, we'd have to use riot tactics to get people away to get out. So these people would knock on the door. One of the guards would come and get us. We'd be like, hey, there's an American looking for Team Rubicon. We go, it was a brain surgeon from Oregon. I'm like, who are you? He's like, I'm a brain surgeon. I'm like, we're not doing brain surgery. How did you? He's like, I heard about you guys online. I brought 2 of my nurses with me. I'm like, can you stitch? He's like, yeah, I can stitch. I'm like, you're on the team, all right. So
That's great.
It was wild. It was insane.
Where did the name come from? You had the name even at that time.
Well, so in the military, you can't do anything cool without naming it, right? And you can't run a mission, you can't do any sort of major operation without giving it an operation name.
That's true in business too.
So the night before we left to the States to fly down, my co-founder William, he called me up and he's like, "Hey, we gotta give the operation a name." I'm like, "Yeah, of course we do." Yeah. And so the Rubicon was an ancient river in Rome that separated Rome from the rest of the Roman territories, and there was a Roman law that stated no Roman generals could bring their armies back across the Rubicon River and into Rome. And 2,000 years ago, Caesar did just that. He didn't disband his army before coming into Rome. He marched on Rome and he overthrew the throne. And so crossing the Rubicon means crossing the point of no return. We knew we could get to the Dominican Republic. We didn't know that we could get into Haiti.
Yeah.
And so we saw that border crossing as kind of the Rubicon for us. And so I said, okay, great. Let's call it Operation Rubicon. Done. Mm-hmm. And William said, no, that sounds like we're taking ourselves too seriously. Let's just call it Team Rubicon because there's only 4 of us. Well, 100,000 volunteers later.
And of course, you haven't gone back.
Yeah, exactly.
So now the organization 100,000 volunteers.
Yep.
You've responded to I think something like 350 disasters. It sounds like there was an insight that came out of Haiti, which is that you had skills that were uniquely suited for these environments.
Yeah.
And how and that moment where you understood that veterans somehow have this instinct to operate, in these environments in a way that maybe no one else does. Mm-hmm. But you've also talked, I think, at times about having a dual mission of what this does, for veterans, as well, and how, and the sense of teamwork, the sense of compassion, the sense of doing good. Was that all there in that first moment in your thinking, or did that evolve over time, and how has that evolved as the organization has grown?
I think we knew it was there early in Haiti. I mean, in Haiti, what smacked us in the face was that first part. It was, this is the most chaotic situation in the world, and this is what we were trained for.
Yeah.
Leading small teams into dangerous situations, bringing order to chaos, accomplishing more with less, all of that. We should recruit more veterans to do this work. But we, even from the first day, I can remember on the ground, just the catharsis that it provided me. I mean, I remember we showed up to a camp in Port-au-Prince. There are hundreds of injured people. This is still within the first week of the earthquake. And I'm talking about people with, many of these people, they'd been injured for 5 days. If we didn't get to them on day 5, by day 6, they would have been dead. Crush wounds, amputations. I memean, it was the worst. And I remember, working on a little kid, and just this kid had like fallen, and a piece of rebar, like from concrete.
Oh my God.
Had gone through his leg, right? So he had this puncture wound from what I'm guessing was rebar.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm cleaning that out. It had been infected. And in war, like it's the kids that get you, right? We'd be in Iraq, we'd be in Afghanistan. You'd see these kids, and you're like, God, they just would have an incredible life if not having been born in this place.
Yeah.
These girls are never going to go to school because they live in Sangin, Afghanistan. And that's what kind of level sets you if you travel the world, if you see really dark places. Like, the kids are all the same, man. They're all the same, just different opportunities. And so for me, like, children, like moments I had with children overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then this moment, helping this kid in Haiti, it just had this really powerful moment for me. And then we saw it, and to your point about tapping into this sense of purpose and giving that back to military veterans. I was hit with a tragedy a year after Haiti. My sniper partner committed suicide in Houston, Texas. This was a gentleman that I served with for 4 years. I was the best man at his wedding. His name was Clay Hunt. Great guy. Joined us in Haiti after the first couple days. Really big heart.
Yeah.
Innocent guy. Very smart guy. Lacking purpose. Clay, he was wounded in our tour in Iraq. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. But I say it a lot. I don't think he died because of post-traumatic stress. I don't think that's why he took his life. I think he took his life because he was looking around. He was working a construction job. He was looking at the guys on his left and his right, and he's like, these guys wouldn't run into machine gun fire for me. He woke up every day and he pulled on that, dirty construction shirt and looked in the mirror, and he's like, not as proud of that uniform as the one I used to wear.
Lost that sense of purpose.
Yeah.
As you think about disasters, there are disasters that get tremendous amounts of headlines, right?
Yeah.
And there's large immediate response. And I'm curious, about the disasters that don't get that attention.
Yeah.
The places you show up, that boy in Haiti who has rebar through his leg. And, for so many people, there's a story on the news of earthquake in Haiti. Many of them don't even know where Haiti is. And that boy with the rebar through his leg is completely forgotten. And tell us a little bit about the disasters that don't get covered, and what you see as the role that Team Rubicon and we all can play in helping those.
Yeah. When we first got started, I remember, just like any business, you kind of do a market analysis, right? And what's the actual opportunity here? When we decided to,
It was larger than you thought.
Yeah, you start looking in and you're like, holy shit, the world's a scary place. You think about, there's, you might think, there's 3 or 4 disasters in this country a year. You're like, then you realize, no, there's 3,000 or 4,000 disasters a year. Hurricane Harvey damages 103,000 homes along the Texas Gulf Coast. Massive, of course, it captures the headlines for months and months, but don't tell a homeowner outside of Omaha, Nebraska right now, which is underwater, that her tragedy is any less significant than a single homeowner in Harvey, right? In the aggregate.
What if she has to get to the hospital or having a baby?
And so I grew up in the part of the country that suffers from these low attention disasters. I grew up in Iowa, right? I was born in Nebraska. Like, both states are underwater today, and you don't know that. I mean, nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, it's not
and
in the news.
What's crazy is so many of these disasters, we just refer to them as low attention disasters. They don't generate any money. They rarely get presidential or state declarations, so we don't release any taxpayer money to assist them. Which impacts the individual, right? And again, it's not the individual's fault that it wasn't Hurricane Harvey, right? But what it does is it drives this wedge deeper into this inequality gap, because the people who can afford really great insurance, who don't have to live on a floodplain, I mean, the statistics are staggering behind people who live in floodplains. You know who lives in floodplains? Poor people. Not because they're dumb. It's because it's the only place they can afford to buy a house. And so then the flood insurance options are terrible. And then they eventually get flooded because they're in a floodplain. And then they have to sell literally everything that they have to try to restore that. And there's this staggering number that the U.S. Treasury Department is talking about a lot now, which is 40% of Americans can't access $400 in the case of an emergency. Half the country, almost half the country, can't access $400 in the case of an emergency. Whether that's like their engine blows on their car or a storm takes the roof off their house. You can't get 3 hotel room nights with $400. And I'm telling you, I go across the country after these situations. I was in Harvey for 5 weeks. I just was in Omaha 2 weeks ago for the flooding there to visit our teams. You meet these people every day who just sit there looking at a house without a roof or with water 3 feet deep in their living room, and they're saying, I don't know what's going to happen to me.
They don't have insurance. They can't afford the deductible if they do. You come to disasters, and this is a problem that you deal with, and and you're immediately in a situation where you have to allocate resources quickly. You have to triage, right? And there's decisions to be made, and these decisions are at a very high level because they're literally life and death decisions. And you're making those decisions on a local basis when you're in Port-au-Prince, and now you're making those decisions on a very high level basis, running this organization that has grown so quickly and really can respond around the world. You have to make decisions about whether you would go to low attention, high attention, stay in the U.S., go abroad. How do you think about the equity of those decisions? How do you think about allocating your resources? And how do you make those the resources you have count?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there aren't enough resources available to address the problem. It's not just that Team Rubicon is under-resourced; the entire situation is under-resourced, and then the system's broken and all of that stuff. But we won't focus on that. We really focus on those low attention disasters. We really try to close that inequity gap when rural towns in Middle America are getting impacted by floods and tornadoes and other storms. I mean, because they are truly left behind. They'll be dealing with those disasters for years to come. We're naturally responding to the Harveys. I mean, Harvey was the largest operation we ever ran. We put 2,500 volunteers on the ground. We assisted 1,200 homeowners. Continuous operations for well over 100 days just in the response phase, and now we're doing the long-term rebuilding. The international domestic question is really interesting. Make no mistake, we have more disasters in this country than we can shake a stick at, and we have more social issues in this country. The opioid crisis, education, income disparity. I mean, we've got some issues here that we need to focus on. But I imagine there's some well-traveled people in here. I imagine there's some people that were born in other countries in here. I've traveled the world pretty extensively. I've seen some bad places. The vast majority of the world's suffering, true suffering, is outside the U.S. And when you look at a situation that's happening right now in a place like Mozambique, 5th from the bottom of the World Development Index, literally the 5th poorest country, 5th most underdeveloped country in the world, 6 weeks ago got hit by a cyclone. 5 days ago got hit by a second cyclone. And we've been on the ground in Mozambique with our emergency medical teams, mobile teams, for the past 6 weeks.
And by the way, the news on that has been not on
One
your
day,
effort.
yeah.
One day of news.
One day of
news. The entire
news.
country is flooded.
In the first
Yeah.
one 6 weeks ago, the entire town of Beira,
Yeah.
90% of it destroyed.
Yeah.
200,000 people displaced. There's already been 15,000 confirmed cases of cholera. I mean, it's bad. It's going to cost us a lot of money to run that operation. It's going to cost us $500,000 roughly, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money, but it is a lot of money. And that's just to get 50 people on the ground. We treated 700 patients with the first teams with the first cyclone. We're still, operations are ongoing for the second cyclone. And we'll have a lot of people who will rightfully or reasonably criticize that decision. They'll say, how can you justify sending $500,000 overseas when Omaha's still underwater and we have teams working there? But how do you make that decision? Well, I'd love to tell you that it's a clean decision matrix that we put nice clean inputs in and it spits out an answer for us. But at the end of the day, we have to determine, are there people that need help? Can we uniquely deliver that help efficiently and effectively? And then can we afford to do it?
Yeah, you do the best you can. Has technology changed how you respond? We think a lot about how technology is changing our business. Has technology changed, especially in these moments where you're making decisions under uncertainty, there's a lack of communication among people, between government and people on the ground. Has technology affected, from 2010 to today, other than just having better phones, for example, how you think through response?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think technology, our implementation of certain technologies is what took us from a niche player in this industry to like a major influential player in the disaster response sector. And it started with, one of the things that the military is really good at is generating intelligence, right? Despite what the president may or may not say about our intelligence agencies, like we're actually really good at that. And what is intelligence? It's taking disparate information and fusing it together to create something that's actionable. That's when it becomes intelligence. That's the difference between information and intelligence. There's a lot of information that comes out after a disaster. There's very little intelligence. This is what we learned early on. Nobody's generating intelligence out of it. And so one of the things we did early,
you can't act on it. There's
meaning
information,
like, okay,
but
you
don't
can
know
tell me all
what
this
to do with
information,
it.
but like unless we pull this together and create something that's actionable, this is actually has no value.
Yeah.
Information has no inherent value until it generates. That is not just a distinction in search of a difference. Trust me, there is. And so one of the things we did very early in 2012, and this was actually really driven home during Hurricane Sandy, where we were working in the Far Rockaways. We started working with a company called Palantir, which is a big privately held company in Silicon Valley. It gets a lot of bad press recently. I think people think it's the boogeyman. It's really a fantastic, at least, product, and I think it's a really great company. But we were using Palantir to fuse all of this information together. We were the first organization to use mobile data collection through smartphones to do damage assessments. And then what we were doing is we were combining that with public data sets like the Social Vulnerability Index. And suddenly we were creating intelligence. Because don't just tell me where the damage is. Because if all the damage is in a part of the Far Rockaways where it's all people's second homes, that's not actually good information to have, because that's not where you should be working, right? But now you combine that damage data set with Social Vulnerability Index, and now you can say that, hey, it's actually the second or third level damage in the highest vulnerability sector. Now that's actionable. Now we can direct our resources to people who need it most. So, over the course of the last 10 years, we've done a lot of stuff like that. Big data. We're doing some really interesting work with Microsoft right now, where we realized that we've got 100,000 volunteers, and we needed to build a platform to manage that resource effectively. And when you go out and you look at all of the software that's custom built for nonprofit organizations, they suck when you compare it to what our for-profit peers get.
Yeah.
And so we said, this is BS. Like, we're an innovator. We can do better, and we need to do better. We have an obligation to the people who need us to be better. And so, we approached Microsoft with like this big, bold idea for building this new system. And they bought into it. So over the course of the last 18 months, we've been working hand in hand with Microsoft's developers. And 3 months ago, we released version 1 of this volunteer management system. And taking a different approach than no other organization's taking, we're giving it away for free.
Right.
So any volunteer organization on the planet can access a world-class system free of charge. And we're going to start layering artificial intelligence and machine learning into this thing. It's going to be...
That's amazing, because it's been developed under conditions. The innovation was driven by extreme conditions, right?
Yeah.
And you get it right, and something that you can make work in those very extreme environments, and you would think it would be robust and useful for lots of other applications. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, what we found was we were taking all these products from all these great companies in Silicon Valley, and we were like duct taping them together to try to make something, you know, classic square peg, round hole solution. And we're just like, you know what? The stakes are too high for us to be working with this, you know, MacGyver built, you know, platform. Like, we need something that's world class. And so we sold Microsoft on that vision, and they've helped us build it.
And now, when a disaster happens, call it a low attention disaster, it's not on the news. 24 hours, you have a plan, 48 hours, how long does it take before you are mobilizing and sending and moving?
I mean, everything starts happening instantaneously, but every disaster is different.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Paradise, California with that fire, we ain't running into that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the professionals are for, right? We're planning, we're trying to figure out, okay, where's it gonna move next? We're partnering with geospatial companies. So we actually have a couple of companies, GXP, which is a BAE Systems company, and then Digital Globe out of Denver. They'll actually redirect satellite assets to take satellite imagery of those zones for us, and then we can use against systems like Palantir to begin assessing that damage. We actually worked with Palantir 4 or 5 years ago, where we didn't help them write the code. We asked them if they could write a code that would take geospatial imagery and use machine learning to evaluate where there were right angles, where there weren't right angles where there should have been. So think about, like, after an earthquake, buildings which should have right angles crumble and they no longer have right angles. So if you can't use humans to crawl through thousands and thousands of square miles looking for damaged buildings, but you could use a machine to go through a before and after and say, hey, these right angles are gone. Let's have a human evaluate whether, you know, what the damage is there. So stuff like that. But, you know, hurricanes, obviously we're tracking them as they form. We're following them in. We're pre-positioning supplies. You know, we've got fleets of trucks, mobile command centers, heavy equipment, all sorts of stuff that we have to move. So when, you know, Hurricane Florence hit last year, we were tracking it. We were fairly confident where it was going to make landfall. We moved equipment trailers and trucks to Atlanta and Charlotte. And as soon as we knew precisely when and where it was going to make landfall, we readjusted again.
Right. I know you're not a climate scientist, but instinctively, do you have a sense
My wife is.
Is she?
My wife's a meteorologist.
Oh, wow. Well, so...
Randomly.
Bring her up.
Yeah.
So, do you have a sense that these disasters are happening more frequently or with greater severity as time goes on?
Yeah, I think there is no doubt that the frequency and severity of storms is increasing and getting worse.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to have a lot of people argue about the reasons why, but the data about the frequency and the severity, indisputable.
Yeah.
Now, severity is driven by a lot of things other than climate change. So when we're talking about severity, we're typically talking about lives lost and insurable losses. And so you can track those, and you can't argue with those numbers. And the reason that's driving a lot of that is that populations are beginning to move into cities, and they're beginning to move more towards hydrological features. So water, you know, lakes, rivers, oceans, and water drastically increases the severity of any event, right? So there are human anthropological reasons why this is getting worse as well, and it's not just human-induced climate change, which we're not going to talk about today, but this is getting worse. This is a situation that's not going away. We have to figure out how to fight this, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly from our seat, and we follow it very closely, responding, as people lose their roofs. It feels like the intensity and severity is increasing, and so the need is very much there, and how we do that, and how you respond in these moments when everything's going wrong, I think is a problem that, whether it's technology or people and partnerships between corporations and Team Rubicon and others, that we need a better handle on, because you look at Mozambique, you look at the South. Stepping back, if there was something from a policy point of view, that you could do and change, whether it's inducing a culture of more service, and having, people have talked about having a universal service requirement, whether it's better just FEMA management. Where do you think the leverage in the system is? What do you think is missing in our moment? And have we lost, I'm particularly interested if we lost this culture of service. Certainly Team Rubicon hasn't, the veterans haven't, but do you feel something's missing there?
Well, you mentioned a service here,
Yeah.
and I think it's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
I am who I am because of the service that I signed up for in the military, and that changed the trajectory of my life. I'm not certain, not necessarily a common outcome of that, but service has this unique ability to bring people together, and I saw it in the military. I see it in Team Rubicon. You see people come together who would never otherwise ever be in the same room.
Yeah.
I was in Omaha 2 weeks ago. We had a contingent of TR volunteers from Boston, a contingent of TR volunteers from like the Florida Panhandle, and some people from Seattle. This is like the weirdest group of folks, and all sides of the political spectrum, all socioeconomic backgrounds, public school, private school, everything in between. And service unites them.
Yeah.
So I think that's powerful. Can you compel someone to serve? Yeah, you can. Is that right for the U.S.? I don't know. Certainly not compulsory military service, but compulsory service of some kind. I think it's a powerful idea. How do you pay for it? I don't know. We want to launch a $3 trillion infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
Hey, world needs ditch diggers.
Maybe with service.
Maybe with service, right?
How do you pay for it's the big question on a number
Yeah,
of fronts,
and the other big policy debate in our world is kind of the state versus federal debate. The disaster management in the U.S. historically was designed to be a state-driven responsibility. FEMA has kind of really struggled with its role, because it really wasn't designed to be the catch-all. It wasn't really designed to be used in the way people kind of think it should be used, or think that it's supposed to be used statutorily. And so I think the real question we have to answer from a policy perspective is this a state's issue, or is it a federal issue? And I want to say it's a state issue, but boy, I've been around the country and seen how different states handle this, and it would be used, I think, as a lever, unfortunately, for politicians to not take action after events, to like shutting down the Jersey Bridge or whatever Christie did, right?
Yeah, I understand.
And that's actually what we're seeing play out in Mozambique right now. Sorry to go on this a little bit further. This is really fascinating, and this is how it might play out. Like, Mozambique went through a nasty civil war for a long time. It ended in the 90s, but the faction that's ruling now is essentially from the north. So when the first cyclone hit, it hit the south, and the response to the southern Mozambique cyclone just was really slow. You could tell that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was closed for the weekend, not processing the applications for groups like ours to come in. It's like, you guys should probably be working on Saturday and Sunday. But it was their rival political faction, and they were using it to inflict political damage and to get political wins on the top side. That we wouldn't be that far off here, I think, in some states.
Yeah. You enjoying being a new dad?
Yeah, I've got a 7-month-old.
You getting sleep?
Yeah, she's sleeping pretty well. I made the joke last night at our event. My wife is taking most of the credit for this, but I think I played a role in it. So she's great. Fatherhood has changed my life.
Yeah, that's terrific. I want to thank you again for the partnership we've had and for being here. And I want to take the time we have left to open it up, because I know so many people here have questions, and would love the chance to participate. So, questions?
And I just want to say, as people are thinking about these really incredible questions that you're going to ask, how much we appreciate working with you all. GAF is not a company that has much of a consumer face, and I have to admit, like when we first started the conversation,
we're changing that.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know what y'all do, and then I heard what you guys did. I'm like, this is as natural a fit for our organization as you can imagine. The work we did in Puerto Rico and the help that you guys provided. I mean, for those of you who may not be aware, but we rebuilt 500 roofs in Puerto Rico, real sustainable hurricane-resistant roofs, replacing roofs that got ripped off by Maria, that would have been rebuilt with zinc oxide shingles and bamboo if we hadn't been there. And the funding, the material, and the expertise you guys provided us was instrumental. 500 people, 500 families back under roofs. That's a fundamental human right, to have a roof over your head. And you guys enabled us to get 500 families back in there, so thank you for that. Now to those amazing questions.
Hey, Jake, I saw last night at your event. Thank you. I saw last night at your event the Microsoft software that you talked about, which was the asset management, the volunteer management system. How do you match, I was asking them a lot of questions. They answered several, but the one thing that I couldn't connect, and I'm interested in how you're using this, is connecting those volunteers into the right teams that work together. And I'm sure that's what you were trying to get to. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so phase 2 of this is where we're going to start to layer in some really fascinating things like machine learning and AI, because we have so much data on our volunteers. And I think what we'll begin to unearth is who works well together and why. Maybe we'll learn that our best team leaders are Vietnam-era veterans who served, did a public service career in the fire department. And so we begin routing them on a volunteer journey that starts feeding them custom training pipelines to route them into leadership opportunities in the organization. And our organization is built on constant data collection and feedback loops. And so we'll constantly be evaluating these people who step into these leadership roles and refining our assumptions about who fits well with one another. We might find out that you should never put a Marine Corps veteran next to an Army veteran. Seriously, we might find out that we have higher volunteer satisfaction when you put all the Marines together in a single strike team. Those are the types of things we plan on unearthing. Is it better to take the weird Yankees from Boston and put them in a team with a bunch of people from Alabama? Or does that actually create a weird dynamic that we want to avoid? Or does that weird dynamic is that something that we want to pursue because that discomfort is good? But yeah, we plan on doing that. And Microsoft's data scientists are chomping at the bit to get into that. And it's really compelling. We're really excited about it. Yeah.
Put New York and Boston people together so there's more competition to beat each other, right?
Yeah, we see plenty of that.
So I know sometimes the biggest thing that you obviously need is money. You need revenue to get the things that you want. Let's say, for example, you got 7 figures or something like that. What would you put it towards? What do you think is the most important thing right now to help your mission grow or to a certain area or something like that?
Yeah, for us right now, it's technology. We really see what we're doing as a platform play. So if you follow the startup space, like Uber, Airbnb, they call them platforms, right? Because what they're doing is they're connecting underutilized resources with demand, right? It creates a marketplace that otherwise didn't exist. And that's really how we've started to think about our organization. We're connecting this underutilized resource, latent veteran skill and energy and willingness to serve that's in communities all across the country. We're connecting that with the opportunity to serve. And so in order to do that, you have to build a platform that is seamless. You have to build Serving with Team Rubicon should be as easy as ordering a Domino's pizza, where you can do it with your thumb and you can track it from the time it goes into the oven to it goes into a delivery guy's car till it rings your doorbell, right? And we weren't there a year ago, and we're approaching that. So we're going to continue to invest in that. We're hiring full stack developers. We're hiring, the business analysts who are helping us to solve those problems. We brought in a new CIO to help architect it, but that's really what the solutions that we're building for. And again, we're giving all of that away. The way we're building it, it's all open source, and any nonprofit in the country can go and get it.
Do you now have situations where you have more volunteers than you have ability to deploy?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
We have 100,000 volunteers. They're not all deploying every year. But the reality is not all of them are looking to.
Right.
Some volunteers are saying, hey, I'm signing up because if my hometown ever gets hit, call me, and I want to be on the roster. Don't call me otherwise. I don't want to fly across the country to help somebody else. Yeah, but we have other people that are like professional volunteers. I meet people that will say, I'm on my 27th operation. Like, wow. What do you do? Are you like independently wealthy? Like, you're 25. Yeah, we do run into that. But really for us, we think of this as a volunteer fire department, right? It's professional, it's trained. You'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah.
And so we know that we have to call 100 volunteers sometimes to get 10 to say yes. Because they can't get childcare, they can't get off work. But if those 10 say yes, that's great. And if those 90 can say yes next week, because the operation extends, great. If they can't say yes till next year, that's fine too.
Yeah.
So first off, thank you very much for your service and everything you guys do at Team Rubicon. Really amazing work. So I have a question more around the supply chain. So can you talk a little bit more about your network and the supplies that you get, but even more importantly, how do you deploy like the final mile logistics to these hard to reach areas?
My solution was to hire a bunch of military logisticians. I'm not a logistics guy, but we've got some really brilliant former logistics officers on our staff. But I can speak a little bit to it. So we have our big national operations centers in Dallas, Texas. So we've got 20,000 square feet of warehouse space there. Floor to ceiling. The guy that manages that used to work for Amazon, Army officer. And ran some warehouses at Amazon. So smart guy knows what he's doing there. That's mostly our non-durable stuff. So it's all of our satellite communications equipment. It's we push all of our technology suites back through it for preventive maintenance and stuff like that. That's where we keep all of our front loaders and other heavy equipment that needs to be maintained, fleets of trucks. We then have a network of probably around 80 to 100 16-foot equipment trailers pre-staged all across the country. So you're never not within 100 miles of one of those trailers, and those are designed, they're packed accordingly to that specific geography. So what's the most likely disaster that it'll be responding to? If it's a flood, it's got a certain amount and type of equipment. If it's a tornado, it's got a different type and set of equipment. But they're designed to sustain a team for up to 5 days before we have to resupply them. Beyond that, we've got a really great partnership with the Home Depot. And so a lot of the non-durable items that we need, things like ventilation masks or work gloves or, Tyvek suits, stuff like that, we'll piggyback on Home Depot's supply chain. And so we have these really great arrangements with them where it's almost like a pro account, but they have in advance custom lists of inventories that we need that they'll drop ship on pallets for us. So we'll say, hey, we need, when you have a flood and you have to muck out these homes, like rip everything out, it's called a muck out. We have, hey, Home Depot, we need 15 muck out kits, and they know exactly what that means, how much of what, they palletize it, and they'll drop ship it to us.
You spoke a couple times around the sense of purpose and objective and how important that is. Could you tell us some of the tools and techniques and technology that you guys use when you're deploying these people into a random place part in the world where they need to deliver on something? How do they get aligned around the mission, aligned around the objective, and stay aligned on that throughout the duration of that mission?
I mean, that's leadership 101. I think, in the military, that's how you're taught to lead, or that's how you're taught to manage is through objectives. And so, in the military, there's all sorts of tools, task, purpose, end state, is one that you'll hear people talk about. Task, what's the task? What's the purpose for that task? What's the end state? What's it look like when it's done? So this is like a language that veterans just are used to speaking in, task, purpose, and end state. Like that's how you give any sort of assignment is with those three components. And even just the structure for how, I can grab any veteran and tell them to communicate to me an objective, and I know the exact format that they'll just naturally put it into to fall into. I don't know the precise words that they'll use to link the task and purpose and the purpose and the end state, right? But beyond that, one of the things that we talk about often at TR is the power of storytelling. Missions. It's great to talk about these objectives, but what's the story? What are we trying to accomplish? And tell it to me, right? Help me understand. Help me to visualize what it is. And so it's not just, if we're dropping teams out of helicopters in Mozambique, but even when I'm trying to motivate my HR team, which is a much less sexy job. Sorry to all the HR people here who aren't jumping out of helicopters. But you use storytelling to help them really envision how every day their work, their tasks, their objectives nest up into the organization and ultimately pay dividends downrange in a place like Mozambique. Human beings love telling stories. Ever since we've invented the campfire and the spoken word, we've sat around campfires and told stories. Some of them true, some of them not true, but there's a reason why we do that, because they connect us to things. And we all want to be connected, and we all want to be heroes. Nobody wants to be a bit player in some story. Every company is a book, and every one of you is a character in it. And as a leader, it's incumbent upon you to make every single person that works for you feel like they're a hero, they're a protagonist in that character, somebody that's got a backstory, a future that's going to actually have an impact on the narrative arc and the plot line. And so we talk about storytelling, and I think we're expert storytellers because we see it as a really powerful tool. We don't tell stories just for story's sake. We tell them because we actually think that that's what inspires people towards action. And I'll end this question with this, and I say this a lot. In the Marine Corps, when they teach you about tactics, like how to respond to a near or a far ambush or a complex ambush, they talk to you in X's and O's like a football coach on a whiteboard, but that's not where the learning happens. The learning happens when they tell you stories about Marines who have come before you, who encountered that situation, who acted the right way in the face of the enemy, because they know that when bullets start flying, people aren't thinking about X's and O's. They're aspiring to be like John Basilone, who beat back the Japanese on Okinawa, right? That's the power of storytelling. So, I think it's one of the most underutilized tools for a leader, but it's something that we really try to reinforce at TR.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. We're excited to be part of this story. We appreciate the partnership we've had. I want everybody to thank Jake for being here, for what we've done. Really excited to do more good together.
Yeah, let's drink some beer. Yeah.